Hello, welcome back to another elementary behavior analysis help video. Today I'm going to be going over reinforcement schedules, and I decided to split today's video into two different videos. In the first one I'm going to be going over types of reinforcement schedules, and in the second one I will be going over examples and what kind of schedule they would fit into. So the first one we have is continuous reinforcement. And this is when reinforcement is given after every time the behavior occurs or every response. This is usually used for new behaviors and to strengthen the new behaviors or get them up to strength so that later on down the road they will be stronger. This can also be referred to as fixed ratio 1 or FR1, and I will explain why this is a little bit later. The next one we have is intermittent reinforcement. This is when reinforcement is not given after every time the behavior occurs, and instead it's given occasionally or intermittently. This can be either fixed or variable, and it's typically used for previously learned behaviors and to maintain these behaviors. So you would usually start with continuous reinforcement and then go into intermittent reinforcement to maintain the behavior. So the first one we have is fixed intermittent reinforcement. It can either be fixed ratio or fixed interval. So a fixed ratio schedule of reinforcement is when reinforcement is given after a set or fixed number of responses. So for example, this could be for every 3 questions that someone gets right, they get a sticker. But in this case, the response number is set, so it'll be every number of responses. And then fixed interval is when reinforcement is given after the first response after a set or fixed amount of time. So if it was a fixed interval of 10 minutes, the first response that occurs after exactly 10 minutes would be reinforced. So earlier when I said that continuous reinforcement is also considered fixed ratio 1, that's because it's a fixed number of responses, and in this case, it's a fixed number of 1 response. So that's why it is referred to as fixed ratio. The next one is a variable intermittent reinforcement. So we have variable ratio, which is when an average of X responses receives reinforcement. So this is going to change or vary each time. This one is a little bit confusing without an example, so when I do examples in my next video, I think it will make a little bit more sense. And variable interval reinforcement is when reinforcement is given after the first response after an average of X amount of time has passed. So again, the amount of time is going to change or vary each time. So while it will change or vary, the average will remain the same. So if it's an average of 3 minutes, it's going to remain around 3 minutes, but the exact amount of time is going to change each time. And this is a chart I found that kind of explains the different strengths of each schedule of reinforcement. So as we can see, a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement has a high response rate, and this has the most resistance to extinction. And this is because if the subject does not know exactly how many responses they have to engage in to get reinforcement, they're always going to assume that they could get reinforcement, and it's going to be a lot harder for that behavior to become extinct. Fixed ratio also has a high response rate, and this depends. The higher the ratio, the more resistance there is to extinction. So for example, a fixed ratio of 10 responses is going to be stronger than a fixed ratio of 5 responses. And then fixed interval and variable interval both have a moderate response rate. So in fixed interval, the longer the interval, the more resistance to extinction. So if it's a fixed interval of 15 minutes, that's going to be stronger than a fixed interval of 10 minutes. And it's similar for variable interval. So in this case, it says more resistance than fixed interval with same average interval. So this just means that if the fixed interval is, say, 5 minutes and the variable interval is also 5 minutes, then variable interval will be stronger. in variable interval, that would be an average of 5 minutes. So each reinforcement would come after about 5 minutes in that example. All right, so I'm going to stop this video, and in the next one, I'll be going over some examples.